October 14th, 1944. The village of Herlingen, Germany, is shrouded in the gray chill of autumn. In a modest house, a man sits with his wife and son. He is a field marshal of the Third Reich, a national hero, and perhaps the most famous soldier in the world. He is Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. But Rommel is not preparing for a battle. He is recovering from a fractured skull, sustained when an Allied plane strafed his car in Normandy months earlier. He believes his recovery is his only priority. He is wrong. A black Mercedes-Benz pulls up to the driveway. Two men step out, General Wilhelm Burgdorf and General Ernst Meisel. They have been sent directly from the Führer's headquarters. They carry a briefcase, and inside that briefcase is not a set of orders for a new offensive, but a death sentence. They enter Rommel's study. The door closes. For the next hour, the man who outmaneuvered the British Empire in the sands of Africa is cornered in a room of his own home. The fact is simple. Rommel has been implicated in the July 20th plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. The fate is a choice that is no choice at all. Burgdorf speaks. You can face the People's Court. You will be tried for high treason. You will be executed, and your family will be sent to a concentration camp. Or, he pauses, you can take this cyanide capsule. You will receive a state funeral with full military honors. Your family will be safe, and your pension will be paid. In the silence of that room, the legend of the Desert Fox reaches its final, tragic conclusion. How did the man who was once Hitler's favorite general find himself holding a glass vial of poison? To understand the fate of Erwin Rommel, we must look back at the facts of his meteoric rise and the moment his conscience became a liability. Erwin Rommel was born in 1891, but he wasn't born into the elite Prussian military caste that dominated the German officer corps. He was the son of a schoolmaster. He was an outsider. When he joined the infantry in 1910, he didn't have the von in front of his name, and he didn't have the social connections of his peers. But World War I changed everything. In the mountains of Italy and the trenches of France, Rommel proved he had something the aristocrats lacked: a raw, instinctive genius for tactical aggression. At the Battle of Caporetto, Rommel led a small group of men to capture thousands of Italian soldiers and dozens of heavy guns through pure speed and audacity. He was awarded the Pour le Mérite, Germany's highest military honor. After the war, while other officers focused on tradition, Rommel focused on the future. He wrote a book, Infantry Greift an, Infantry Attacks. It was a manual on how to use speed and confusion to paralyze an enemy. It became a bestseller, and it caught the eye of a rising politician named Adolf Hitler. Hitler loved Rommel. To the Nazi leader, Rommel was the new German. He wasn't one of those stiff, monocle-wearing Prussian generals who looked down on Hitler's working-class roots. Rommel was a man of the people, a front-line hero. When Hitler rose to power, he bypassed seniority to promote Rommel, eventually putting him in charge of his personal security detail during the invasion of Poland. But Rommel was not a politician. He was a soldier. He saw in Hitler a leader who was finally restoring German pride. At this stage, Rommel's fate was inextricably tied to the Führer's ambition. He didn't see the darkness yet. He only saw the glory of the mission. In 1940, the world saw the first true fact of Rommel's genius. He was given command of the 7th Panzer Division for the invasion of France. He had never commanded tanks before, but he applied the same rules he learned in the mountains of Italy: move faster than the enemy can think. Rommel's division moved so quickly, so deep behind enemy lines, that both the French and the German High Command lost track of him. They called it the Gespenster Division, the Ghost Division. Rommel didn't lead from a map in a bunker miles away. He was in the lead tank. He was in the dirt with his engineers, helping them build bridges under fire. This was the Rommel style. He believed that a commander must see the battlefield with his own eyes.
If he saw an opening, he took it, often ignoring orders from his superiors to stop. His success in France was so overwhelming that Hitler could no longer ignore his potential. But the success in France also sowed the seeds of his destruction. The senior generals in Berlin, men like Halder and Keitel, began to resent this upstart who ignored the chain of command and went straight to the Führer. They called him a media general. They were waiting for him to fail. They wouldn't have to wait long, but first, Rommel had a date with destiny in the desert.
In February 1941, the Italian army in North Africa was on the verge of total collapse. They were being humiliated by the British. Hitler, not wanting his ally Mussolini to fall, sent a small blocking force to Libya. He chose Rommel to lead it. This force would become the legendary Deutsches Afrikakorps. Hitler's orders were clear: stay on the defensive, hold the line. Rommel did the exact opposite. Within days of arriving, Rommel launched an offensive. He drove the British back hundreds of miles across the Cyrenaica desert. He used the vast, open spaces like an ocean, maneuvering his tanks like ships. He used flak guns, the famous 88mm anti-aircraft cannons, against British tanks, a tactic that terrified his opponents. The British began to fear him. They began to obsess over him. General Claude Auchinleck even had to issue a memo to his officers, telling them that Rommel was not a superman or a wizard, but to the men in the sand, he was the desert fox. He was a man who seemed to appear out of the dust, striking where they were weakest and vanishing before they could hit back. This is where the fact of Rommel's character becomes most important. Despite fighting for a regime committed to genocide, Rommel's war in Africa was known as the Krieg ohne Hass, the war without hate. He famously ignored Hitler's commando order, which commanded the execution of captured enemy special forces. He shared his water and food with prisoners. He treated the war like a giant chess match of honor. But while Rommel was winning battles, he was losing the war of logistics. Berlin didn't care about Africa. They were focused on the invasion of the Soviet Union. Rommel begged for more tanks, more fuel, more men. He was told to wait. The fate of the Afrika Korps was sealed at El Alamein in 1942. Confronted by General Montgomery's massive superiority in materiel and air power, Rommel's genius was no longer enough. For the first time, he realized that bravery could not overcome a lack of fuel. When he asked Hitler for permission to retreat to save his men, Hitler sent a famous telegram: "Victory or death, not 1 inch of ground must be yielded." Rommel was horrified. To him, the lives of his soldiers were sacred. This was the first crack in his loyalty. He realized that Hitler was willing to sacrifice every German soldier for a prestige that no longer existed. By 1944, Rommel was back in Europe. The Desert Fox was now the defender of the West. Hitler put him in charge of Army Group B, tasked with defending the Atlantic Wall against the coming Allied invasion. Rommel toured the defenses and was appalled. He saw the wall for what it was, a propaganda myth. He worked feverishly, installing millions of mines and Rommel's asparagus, pillars designed to crash Allied gliders. He knew the fact of the situation. If the Allies weren't stopped on the beaches in the first 24 hours, Germany would lose the war. But he was fighting two enemies, the Allies and his own high command. Rommel wanted the Panzer divisions stationed right on the coast. His superior, Field Marshal von Rundstedt, wanted them held back as a reserve. Hitler, ever the micromanager, compromised by keeping the tanks under his own personal control. When D-Day arrived on June 6, 1944, Rommel was in Germany for his wife's birthday. By the time he raced back to the front, the panzers were paralyzed by Hitler's refusal to release them. The beachhead was established. The fate of the Third Reich was now inevitable. In the weeks that followed, Rommel saw the slaughter in Normandy. He saw the Allied air power destroying everything that moved. He traveled from bunker to bunker, speaking with his commanders. He began to hear whispers,
whispers that Hitler was mad, whispers that Germany's only hope was to eliminate the Führer and negotiate a peace with the West. Rommel was a soldier, not an assassin, but he was also a patriot. He reached a point where he believed that his duty to Germany outweighed his oath to Hitler. He never joined the active plot to kill Hitler. He famously said an assassination would only make him a martyr, but he was aware that a group of officers was planning to remove the leader. He didn't report them. In the eyes of the Gestapo, silence was just as deadly as a bomb.
On July 17, 1944, 3 days before the famous assassination attempt at the Wolf's Lair, Rommel's staff car was spotted by British Spitfires. The planes dived, their cannons roaring. Rommel's car overturned. He was thrown from the vehicle, suffering a fractured skull and massive internal injuries. While Rommel lay unconscious in a hospital, Klaus von Stauffenberg walked into a briefing room in East Prussia and placed a briefcase bomb under Hitler's table. The bomb exploded. Men died, but Hitler lived. The revenge was swift and barbaric. Thousands were arrested. Under torture, one of the conspirators, Colonel von Hoffacker, mentioned Rommel's name. He claimed Rommel had promised to support the new government once Hitler was gone. Whether this was true or not didn't matter. Hitler felt personally betrayed. The man he had made into a legend, the man he had used as the face of the German army, was now a threat to his survival. But Hitler was a master of image. He couldn't put Rommel on trial. It would show the world that even his greatest general wanted him dead. The fate of the Desert Fox would have to be handled in the shadows. We return to October 14, 1944, the study in Herrlingen. The generals have given Rommel his ultimatum. Rommel walks out of the study and finds his son, Manfred. He takes him aside and says, "I have just told your mother that I shall be dead in a quarter of an hour. The house is surrounded. The Führer has given me the choice of poison or the People's Court." Manfred, only 15 years old, begs his father to fight, to escape, but Rommel knows the fact. There is no escape from a totalitarian regime that has already decided you are a ghost. He hugs his son, puts on his leather overcoat, and picks up his field marshal's baton. He looks like the Desert Fox one last time. He steps into the back of the black Mercedes. Generals Bergdorf and Meisel sit on either side of him. The car drives a few miles into the woods. The driver is told to step away. Inside the car, Erwin Rommel breaks the cyanide capsule. He is dead in seconds. The machine of fact and fate turns one last time. The Nazi government announces to the world that Field Marshal Rommel has died of his injuries from the car accident. Hitler declares a day of national mourning. He sends a massive wreath to the funeral. He stands by the coffin of the man he murdered, pretending to weep for a fallen hero. It was the ultimate lie to cover the ultimate betrayal. Erwin Rommel remains one of the most debated figures of World War II. To some, he was the good German, a man who fought with honor and eventually stood up to a monster. To others, he was a willing tool of a genocidal regime until the moment they realized they were losing. But the fate of Erwin Rommel teaches us something deeper about power. It shows us that in a system built on absolute loyalty to one man, no amount of brilliance, no amount of fame, and no amount of service can protect you once you begin to think for yourself. The Desert Fox was a master of the battlefield, but he was a novice in the world of politics. He lived for the army, he fought for the Reich, and in the end, he died for a secret. History records the facts of his battles, but it is the fate of his final hour that reminds us of the true cost of serving a tyrant.